Okay, biology students, this is for chapter 1.2 for your notes, and I want you to fill out the note-taking guide that you should have received in class while you watch this. I would ask that for these videos, please don't skip ahead and just write down all the blanks because that won't help you actually learn what you need to learn. So section 1.2 is titled What is Science? So you're in a science class. We already talked about what biology is. Science is just getting knowledge, getting information about the world around you. And the way that happens is through scientific inquiry. And scientific inquiry is asking questions, and it's rooted in unbiased observations, is what you would write down, observations, and experiments. Experimentation. So for these blanks, you just write down observations and experimentation. And during any time in this video, of course, you can pause it and to write down the words that you need. So to figure out about the world around you, scientific inquiry, you need to make observations, look at the world around you, and experiment and make inferences or hypotheses about the things that you see and read. You've maybe heard of a theory and a scientific law. What is the difference? A theory, so that's what goes in that blank there, is an explanation of things that you see, supported by many different hypotheses, observations, and experiments. It's well supported essentially with data. So a scientific theory is well experimented, and many different scientists have come to the same kind of conclusion. A scientific law describes relationships in nature, okay? So the law of gravity, okay? It's what happens to everybody in nature, but it doesn't necessarily describe or explain why that relationship is the way it is. Theories do not become laws, and laws do not become theories. They are different. So science also expands just general knowledge base. What we know today about disease is way more than we knew in the 1950s. The surgeries that are done now are way more advanced. So to understand what's going on today, to expand knowledge, scientists need to combine what is already known with new evidence, new information from new observations, new experiments, okay, to increase the knowledge base or expand the knowledge in the world. Science does that. There's another thing called pseudoscience that imitates science. There's the word imitate. Pseudoscience is driven by some kind of commercial or cultural goal. So they get money for it or other reasons. When there's new information that maybe discredit it, it's ignored, not welcomed. Science questions results, meaning if you get data that it's not consistent with current data, maybe they disagree, that's of interest, okay? So we're going to study that more to see what's the correct answer, okay? Like the world used to be flat, right? We now know that the world is not flat. That's because of new data that was collected, and there was a clash, okay, to come to hopefully a consensus of a scientific understanding. In pseudoscience, pseudo, that's kind of a hard word to spell, so I'll show you that one. Pseudo is P-S-E-U-D-O. Pseudoscience. Pseudo means false science. If there's an inconsistency, new inconsistency, if things don't line up, it is ignored. Scientists use standard procedures, okay? So they're going to make observations, make a hypothesis, set up an experiment, collect the data, a large amount of data, large amount of observations, make that finding more credible. And it's going to gather from unbiased investigations, and it's going to be careful. It's going to be documented what is done. Okay, so, and if it's a well done research, it's controlled experimentation, controlled for outside factors. If you're testing this new pesticide on plants, you want the plants to all be the same plant, be grown in the same type of soil, the same regulated temperature, so that you have a controlled experiment. If you're changing one thing, you know exactly what's causing that change. Pseudoscientists make claims that cannot be tested. How do you test? They're saying this thing, they're saying whatever they're saying, but it's not testable. That's not science. Scientists undergo peer review. One thing I want to come back to is pseudoscience. An example, that's what this picture is the astrological symbols. Horoscopes is pseudoscience, because Taurus, you might look at your horoscope for Taurus for one day or 1 week and be like, oh my goodness, that is so me. But did you know that they'll use that same little snippet for maybe Aquarius a different month, a different week? They find things that kind of fit pretty much everybody at some point in their life, and that's what they print. It has no scientific evidence that that's actually true and valid. Something that is also science is something called peer review. When scientists do their research and publish their work in these journal articles, it goes through a process called peer review. And you know who your peers are. Those are people like you, your classmates. My peers would be other teachers. Scientists are peers with other scientists that do similar work. So if I'm a parasitologist and I'm publishing this paper about the transmission of West Nile virus in Minnesota, before I can have that article published, I'm going to send it to other scientists that are also parasitologists that know something about West Nile virus, and they review that work to make sure it's credible, make sure I use the scientific method appropriately, and then I'm not making outlandish claims that aren't true. That process is called peer review. So, and it's evaluated by other scientists who are in the same field. So like a parasitologist or another ecological scientist, okay? They're conducting similar research. One example of where these articles are published is something called PubMed. And you could search PubMed on your computer too. Oop, there's the lights. And pretty much research all sorts of scientific papers, which you'll need to do for your research project. It's called PubMed. And you could search West Nile virus. And scientists do this, and they look what is the most current research, scientific research with West Nile virus. What has already been done? What needs to be done? And they'll check information. And you can do that too if you're interested in different types of diseases or other things. PubMed is a resource that scientists use to publish their findings. All right, lastly here, every person needs to be scientifically literate. And this includes you, and it includes me. I know in life you'll hear things like, oh my goodness, did you know that if you eat this food, this will happen? Or did you know that vaccines cause autism? Maybe you heard that. You need to be able to think for yourself and say, that doesn't really sound like it's a thing. Are you sure about that? Where did you read it? Where did you get that information? This means that you're scientifically literate. You're going to combine what you know about science and think about it. Reason with it. Does that actually make sense? Look it up for yourself. Don't just believe what somebody else tells you. Research it. if you really want to know the truth. And that goes for politics, it goes for science, it goes for anything. Ethics is the word there. Ethics is a set of moral principles or values. And scientists need to have good ethics because they can't publish research if it's not valid and true. An example of a scientist that was unethical is Andrew Wakefield in 1998. And I'll click on this link here and I'll just tell you a little brief summary. This is the scientist that published work that said that vaccines cause autism. And it turned out that his research was invalid and he only tested 12 kids, which isn't a good sample size to say anything as big as that. And he turned out that he got in a lot of trouble because he was unethical in his claims. But a lot of people heard that autism is caused by vaccines, and they believed him. And they stopped vaccinating their kids. And now we have a problem, even in the United States, where diseases that should be not happening are happening because people have chosen not to vaccinate. And I believe that is all for 1.2.